how many states have cameras in court at this point?
I know it's the majority of states now.
'Cause
So
it's none of the states where I practice, which I'm grateful for. I understand the argument for cameras in court. There's something to it, the transparency, but I think it distorts. People start performing for an audience that when you're on TV, and especially now that there's law streaming going on. So, you don't have to fight for network attention to potentially have thousands of people watching you do your stuff.
from this I make a living. Even if I weren't, I would still be in favor of a camera in every courtroom. Not every courtroom. Domestic matters should not be televised in any jurisdiction. Anything involving children and minors needs to appropriately conform to the rules dealing with children and minors. I see some utility to saying, all right, we need to be very careful about live streaming. I also see the utility in moving away from live streaming to recorded and published cases, not only for the purposes of not using minors' names, not doxing individuals like we saw in the case down in New Mexico. So in Hannah's case, that happened. There's also some issues with live streaming. And this we saw in the Chad Daybell trial, where one of the witnesses watched his wife testify on YouTube without realizing that that also was a no-go and that that was not permitted. We saw in the certain J.E.'s trial of his mistress / co-conspirator, Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, because she was in that jurisdiction and because not only did they not publicize the case, but because they kept the public audience very limited, there weren't riots in the street, which I think were very warranted. So,
riots were warranted, you're saying?
Yes.
How can you, as an officer of the court, ever suggest that such threats to the peace could ever be warranted?
What's the real Danielle would never suggest that. Oh. The personality online, Danny, of course. Of course.
Danny on direct.
Yeah, Danny on direct might say some crazy things.
Direct.
No, I'm just saying, no, of course riots aren't warranted, but protests certainly are. And I think that in that case, they were warranted and necessary. The reason that I see the value of cameras in each jurisdiction is in cases like Kyle Rittenhouse. Johnny Depp's another one. Look at how Johnny Depp and Kyle Rittenhouse's cases were being covered in the public by the media, the people who we trust to actually attend these cases and provide their actual legal analysis and trial coverage. How opposed I am to the misinformation that was spread by mass media outlets, I can't overstate it. It was disgusting. It was disturbing. And I think when people actually saw the trial for themselves, saw it live, were able to actually watch some things that led them to ask questions about the system and the process and to say, wait a second, can I trust that I'm going to be getting a fair trial if I were in the defendant's shoes? Because nothing escapes the attention of the people who watch these live streams. We have been able to catch a lot of misrepresentations that were made to the court, a lot of oddities that were presented that internet sleuths who were completely unrelated to the case in the trial were able to observe through a live stream and alert the court to.
This is fascinating. That sounds like a great law review article.
I would think so. The other thing to consider as well is judges' demeanor. So think about the judges that you argue in front of. Imagine how their demeanor might change for the better if they had 1,000 eyes watching them or 100,000 eyes watching them all at one time. There are certainly cases that I can think of. I would pray that I never have to argue in front of that judge because either A, that judge doesn't pay attention while they're in court, while the trial is ongoing, or B, the judge has an incurable sense of their own divinity. Like they truly think they are God.
Or they're just dumb. They're just awful.
Look at the YSL trial, for example.
You go into custody at this point in time. I think that the court needs to again declare a mistrial. I understand that you spoke with a witness outside of our presence.
Yes, I had an ex parte conversation, which is appropriate.
And you influenced the witness based on information belief, and I'd like to have that all on the record.
All right.
I mean, I don't know why that's so hard to do. If nothing happened bad, that's fine. But you're acting like, tell me who it is and don't talk about the substance. Why can't we have an issue that was outside of presence. It should not have been.
Because you got some information that you shouldn't have gotten.
Appropriate mechanism to rooting out the corruption of that judge and of that courtroom was to have everyone be able to see the judge. He should be ashamed. He should be embarrassed. And a little bar reckoning at the back of the monthly bar newsletter that goes out to all the attorneys, the little magazine, that's not sufficient. And the court of public opinion does matter. And the legitimacy of the court is always at stake.